and make our classrooms safer places to learn. I know the value of life, and when a mother has to go through that very personal decision, it should be done in privacy, not the government way. Stay out of it.
He knows a lot about conflict of interest, since he's the one that sent the bill down to the legislature to give himself a pay raise. And I promise you this, I will be a hard-working lieutenant governor, working every day to meet the challenges of Guam and to lift Lou's vision for Guam that is fair, safe, and prosperous.
Watchdog of the Interior Department now referring Secretary Ryan Zinke for an investigation.
Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke under fire for potentially using his office for personal gain. Sources tell the Associated Press that the department's Inspector General has referred a case to the Department of Justice, although it's not clear yet what that investigation is focused on. Zinke has faced questions over his role in a Montana land deal involving the chairman of the energy giant Halliburton. A lawyer for Zinke, Steve Ryan, says, quote, "It is disappointing that unsubstantiated and anonymous sources have described an IG office referral to members of the media." In Washington, Sean Lanchel, Fox News.
A federal law enforcement official saying disciplinary issues prompted the transfer of gangster James Whitey Bulger to the federal prison where he was beaten to death within hours of his arrival earlier this week. A deadly viral outbreak at a New Jersey long-term pediatric rehab center is getting worse.
A 10th patient has died from adenovirus at the Wanacue Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation in the northern part of the state, and state health officials have confirmed a new case at the facility, bringing the total number of cases to 28. Concern has now spread to South Jersey, where there are now 4 confirmed cases of the virus at a similar pediatric facility near Philadelphia. For healthy people, adenovirus poses little risk. It can cause mild cold or flu symptoms. Some strains can also cause diarrhea and pink eye, but it can be serious for those with weakened immune systems like those at the centers. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
The American Civil Liberties Union demanding that a Hawaii retirement home stop discriminating against non-Catholic residents and let them take advantage of the state's new medically assisted suicide law if they want to. Now, the land under the home's buildings is owned by the Catholic Church. The current property lease prevents what the church terms morally repugnant activity from taking place. That includes euthanasia. I'm Paul Stevens. This is Fox News.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
I'm Ken Leon Guerrero, spokesperson for Guam Citizens for Public Accountability, reminding you that your vote counts. Help make Guam's future better than Guam's recent past by voting for the write-in candidate Frank Uggan and Alicia Limpiaco. And vote for the rest of the candidates recommended for a better Guam. You can find the list in the full-page ad in this Sunday's Guam Daily Post. For more information, visit Guam Citizens' website at www.guamc4pa.org.
Super Typhoon U2 spared us here on Guam, but the same cannot be said for our neighboring islands. From now till November 16th, join us as we help Saipan and Tinian to get back on their feet. Acceptable donations include batteries, flashlights, tools, cleaning supplies, mosquito coils, rope, toiletries, personal hygiene items, and others. Donations can be dropped off to all GTA stores, the Guam Daily Post, all Guam Fire Department stations, and the Santa Teresita Catholic Church. For more information on how you can help, visit postguam.com.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
As I look around, there are so many longtime Democrats, but it doesn't serve the good of our island or our Democratic Party when we don't embrace the will of our party. And that will was choosing Lou and Josh.
The people that have been forgotten, we will bring people helping people back. I'm banking on Lou and Josh. I want to invite those Democrats, those Republicans that are sitting maybe on the sidelines. Well, I want to tell them that they have a home here with us.
Family is about more
Choose this ad.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
Konnichiwa! We'll be celebrating the 39th Japan Autumn Festival on Saturday, November 17th, 2 to 9 p.m. at the Governor Joseph Flores Beach Park or Ipao Park in Tumon. Parking will be available across Oka Payless with free shuttle service starting at 1:30 p.m. Advance tickets available now at the Japan Club of Guam office located on the first floor of PM Marine. Once again, the Japan Autumn Festival at Ipao Beach Park, November 17th from 2 to 9. Come join us. For information, call 646-8066. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Bank of Guam, and the radio stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Josh and I have proposed a comprehensive plan to kickstart our economy, create jobs with rising wages, fight the root causes of crime, fund our schools, and make our classrooms safer places to learn. I know the value of life, and when a mother has to go through that very personal decision, it should be done in privacy, not the government, Ray. Stay out of it.
He knows a lot about conflict of interest since he's the one that sent the bill down to the legislature to give himself a pay raise. And I promise you this, I will be a hard-working lieutenant governor, working every day to meet the challenges of Guam and to lift Lou's vision for Guam that is fair, safe, and prosperous.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know, we talk about the Second Amendment every day at the beginning of Tall Tales here, and I'm going to have to direct the conversation to the first sentence of the 14th Amendment, and then we're going to do a little compare and contrast thanks to the San Jose Mercury News. You remember the first sentence of the 14th Amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And as I go a little farther, you'll see what I mean when I say compare and contrast. And, of course, the reason that we are able to do these kinds of things here on Tall Tales is that I rely heavily on the Tall Tales think tank constitutional research branch to help me prepare these parts of the program. So I'm going to skip my usual rant about just Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia today and pick up this story in the San Jose Mercury entitled Constitution's Second Amendment Gun Rights Invoked in Birthright Citizenship Debate. That's by a guy named John Woolfolk. You know, wool like from a sheep. Woolfolk. And he says, President Trump's challenge this week to the long-held understanding that the Constitution guarantees citizenship to children born on U.S. soil, even if their mother was in the country illegally, has invoked another hotly debated constitutional right, to bear arms. Of course, you all know the answer to the question of whether or not a person has the right to bear arms. We know that according to both the Heller and McDonald cases, a person has an individual right to keep arms in his house for his personal protection, right? But gun control advocates have long questioned whether the Constitution's seemingly straightforward Second Amendment right of the people to keep and bear arms really means that the lady next door, kind of sexist there, can legally keep a semi-automatic rifle in her bedroom. Courts and constitutional scholars have long sided with gun rights advocates who say it does. Trump this week questioned whether the 14th Amendment's seemingly straightforward guarantee that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States applies to the children of immigrants here illegally. Courts and constitutional scholars have long sided with immigration rights advocates who say it does. But the president's pronouncement had gun rights and immigration rights advocates using each other's logic as they traded arguments on social media this week. State Senator Scott Wiener, guy's a wiener, State Senator Scott Wiener, Democrat San Francisco, ribbed conservatives on Twitter over whether their insistence that the Second Amendment means what it says applies to the 14th. 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, ellipsis, are citizens of the United States. Yet Trump says he's ending birthright citizen. I guess GOP is taking the Second Amendment approach. If you don't like the actual language, just announce it says something else. Back to Antonin Scalia, I guess, and his omission of the word militia from his reading of the Second Amendment. Antonio Salguero, a security contractor and former Libertarian state Senate candidate for the district east of San Diego, replied that both the Second and, did I lose that sentence? Are very clear with no room for interpretation. Shall not be infringed, and persons born in the United States are citizens. Both Democrats and Republicans are wrong about a lot of things. The Firearms Policy Coalition, maybe I had it right the first time, the Firearms Policy Coalition, a gun rights group, jumped into the fray as well, noting that gun rights advocates have criticized justices and constitutional scholars who insist on sticking to the original meaning of the Constitution's words. So is everyone a textualist or originalist now? The Firearms Coalition asked on Twitter, referencing the Second Amendment's language that gun rights shall not be infringed. Let's go back to that whole shall not be infringed thing. Brandon Combs, president of the Firearms Policy Coalition, said in response to questions from his from this news organization that we believe the Constitution's text, structure, and limitations on size and scope of government matter in all cases. We work hard to protect freedom of speech, due process, equal protection laws, and many other rights in addition to our Second Amendment work, because all of our rights stand or fall together. Such a statement I would wholeheartedly agree with. He added that gun rights supporters necessarily consider the Republican an ally. We measure outcomes in work product, not empty rhetoric and useless keynote speeches at gun conventions. UCLA professor Eugene Wallach, who teaches constitutional law, was a clerk for the United States Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, said Wednesday that he doesn't think the argument over birthright citizenship will have much effect on gun rights. Some constitutional provisions have been interpreted based on close reading of the text and original meaning. Others haven't, Wallach said by email. I'm not saying here that either approach is necessarily good or bad, But given this wide array of interpretive approaches for various constitutional provisions, I don't think that, say, interpreting the citizenship clause using a living constitution approach would merely materially increase the likelihood that the Second Amendment would be so reinterpreted. Volokh said in an online Reason article Wednesday that while he personally disagrees with the concept of birthright citizenship, the Constitution seems pretty clear to me that children born to illegal immigrants on U.S. soil are citizens. He noted that the Supreme Court has repeatedly taken this view. Volokh said he also agrees with the court majority's interpretation of the Second Amendment and a 2008 decision that upheld an individual's right to possess a gun. The decision rejected a gun control advocate's argument based on the Second Amendment's preamble that the right to bear arms applied only to those serving a well-regulated militia. Took a long time to get to the point, but we finally made it. So what they're saying is that if you want to read the 14th Amendment to say that people born in the United States of illegal aliens are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are therefore not citizens, then you ought to read the Second Amendment the same way, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, etc. The right to people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Then you can't read the word militia out of the Second Amendment. Well, it's an interesting, I suppose, concentration on the vocabulary of those two amendments. I don't know that it's going to go anywhere. But anyhow, that's how we start our day here on Tall Tales, talking about the Second Amendment to the Constitution, because, as I mentioned, the Tall Tales think tank Institute of Constitutional Studies is always furnishing me with more material dealing with our United States Constitution, which we hold in very high regard here. And I think even the real Joe Cruz has something to say about that, right, real Joe Cruz?
I do, sir.
What was that?
Oh, about being an active and informed citizen.
Yes.
How it's a right, not just a duty.
Yeah, Constitution and laws are good, but in the absence of, what was it that you said?
Active and informed citizenship?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They probably aren't going to last very long, right? Okay, so from here we go straight to Meet the Press, also referred to as Demi-Kotny. And, of course, the real Joe is right on the ball whenever he hears the words Demi-Kotny playing the theme song for Meet the Press. And the real Joe is so valuable here on the point that there apparently is competition for his services, because this morning he was the producer for the ever-popular Ray Gibson show, and now he's back. I guess we'll stick with sports, right? Today's a double-header, right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very seldom that you see a pitcher that can go 9 innings in 2 games in a doubleheader, but here's the real Joe Cruz. I hope you're listening out there, Jack Hattick, because you're not the only baseball player in this league. Okay, so starting out here with Demi-Kotny, our view, hurdles remain for medical marijuana program. Learn how you can, as you were 4 years after voters approved Guam's medical marijuana program, our elected leaders passed a law allowing qualified patients and caregivers to grow cannabis at home. But for those who want to take advantage of the program and doctors who might want to help patients, there are still hurdles to overcome. The government has no funding to monitor home cultivation, and there's a lack of legal guidance for doctors. Well, here's some really cheap legal guidance for doctors, okay? Possessing, dealing in, etc., cannabis or marijuana is against federal law. That's a pretty easy one to get a handle on. Now, I don't know about doctors' ethics, but I wonder if doctors have, as strictly as doctors are regulated when it comes to prescribing legal drugs, I wonder what the professional aspects for doctors are in getting involved with patients' marijuana and cannabis. I have a feeling it's probably not a very interesting story. But for those who want to take advantage of the program and doctors who might want to help patients, there are still hurdles to overcome. The government has no funding to monitor home cultivation, and there's a lack of legal guidance for doctors. On Saturday, the medical marijuana advocacy group Grassroots Guam will hold a medical cannabis workshop from 9 to 4 at the Guam Museum. And then there's some information here about the workshop. And then if experience in other areas is any indication, only a small percentage of Guam's population will ever make use of the program. But all Guam residents should make note of how the program has been managed or not managed by elected officials. In 2014, people cast their ballots and told elected officials they wanted the program. At that point, lawmakers needed to stop debating the pros and cons of medical marijuana, okay, and start figuring out how to get the program up and running. Instead, the mandate from the people faced uncertain rules, legal hurdles, a lack of funding, and other obstacles that led to delay after delay. Delaying the program won't make it go away. It just leads to frustration for patients and loved ones. Well, I hate to, I guess I don't hate to, but I'm going to, to kind of throw cold water on this whole thing. I think expectations were extremely high when this program began, because as I have mentioned repeatedly, marijuana is a Schedule I drug in the federal regulatory scheme of regulating drugs. That means that according to the law, there's no medical use for marijuana, etc. Now, I don't think that that's a very good decision, and if it were up to me, I'd say, no, let's not make it Schedule I. Let's put it somewhere in the schedule where research can be conducted, and if it has any real medical use, fine, because we know how to deal with medicine in the United States. We have a Food and Drug Administration, a highly regulated system for distribution of drugs, for prescription of drugs, etc. But if it's Schedule I, that particular mechanism is thwarted. And my second problem with the whole thing is that the criminal law dealing with individual conduct has until very recently been a matter of state law. So it should be up to states to determine whether or not a particular substance is legal or illegal. And the national government wouldn't seem to have a role in it unless they're regulating the transportation, etc., of cannabis in interstate commerce. That's what the Constitution says. They're not supposed to get down to the personal level and tell people what kind of substance they can put into their bodies and what kind they can't. That would be my constitutionalist vision of the whole thing. However, as I've mentioned before with Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia and the Second Amendment, whatever is determined by our legislature, by our Congress, and our Supreme Court is the law, is kind of what we got to do. Because if we don't, then we get into the other A word. I'm not talking about abortion here when I say A word. I'm talking anarchy. Because if we think that we have the option of choosing which of the laws we're going to obey and which ones we're not going to obey, we're heading towards anarchy pretty quickly. And I think that's kind of what we stepped off on here in 2014, where we have our governor and our senators who took an oath to support the Constitution and laws of the United States, and our governor who is expressly charged by the Organic Act of Guam for the execution of the laws of the United States, legalizing something that national law says is illegal. So the Real Joe is playing Dave Brubeck's Take 5 again, so I got to take a short break here, and I'll come back to this, finish this, and then we'll go to the post.
John Gibson, digging up history. The President of the United States, who started out as a model, even started a $1 million modeling agency and quit it all. That story after this. Let's talk heirloom sheets and towels from Redland Cotton in Alabama. First, the family farm, growing the finest cotton in the world. The spinning, the looming, every step made in America, right down to the cutting and sewing. Sheets designed from a long-lost 1920s weave. The softest, most comfortable, longest-lasting sheets you've ever slept on. The Redland family, dedicated to America and linens you'll treasure. Check out redlandcotton.com for America's linen. redlandcotton.com. He was football star handsome. He was going to Yale. He had a beautiful girlfriend. She started modeling, got him into it too. They were on magazine covers. Then he started a modeling agency himself. Eventually it was worth millions. And a beautiful model girlfriend could have married her, could have continued the life of the beautiful people and vast riches. Instead, he finished law school, went back to the Midwest, to Michigan, where he started a career that led him to the U.S. Congress for decades and led to his nomination and election as vice president. And eventually, as we all know, he became president when Richard Nixon resigned. He was the one-time male model, President Gerald Ford. I'm John Gibson, digging up history.
Josh and I have proposed a comprehensive plan to kickstart our economy, create jobs with rising wages, fight the root causes of crime, fund our schools, and make our classrooms safer places to learn. I know the value of life, and when a mother has to go through that very personal decision, it should be done in privacy, not the government, Ray. Stay out of it.
He knows a lot about conflict of interest, since he's the one that sent the bill down to the legislature to give himself a pay raise. And I promise you this, I will be a hard-working lieutenant governor, working every day to meet the challenges of Guam and to lift Lou's vision for Guam that is fair, safe, and prosperous.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talafofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan, Talafofo.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, I just heard that commercial there, and it prompted me again to say, "Arr." Okay, well, let's see who's on board here. Let's play that welcome back song there, Real Joe Cruz.
Welcome back.
Glad to see you all back here. It is Friday. It's my least favorite day of the week. I prefer Mondays because on Monday I got a whole week of tall tales ahead of me. Friday, I got 2 days of no tall tales. I somehow managed to get through it, but I'm really hungry for that Monday to get back on tall tales. So here we are on a Friday, and we've got Ismael Velez on board, Chris Abalencia, Carl Bora. Nelson is early for school today. Congratulations, Carl. Tom Moffness is here. Jose Martinez says that, let's see, he had a little workup on All Souls Day that I seem to have lost here. Anyhow, he says, Blessed All Souls Day. And I've got Shelley Gibson. Hi, friends, and happy Friday. And Shelley Gibson, Hafa, Mr. Klitzkie, Todomalik, Zahagunai, Shelley, Hafa Tatat Manuho, Kumalekau, huh? And we've got Rico Blancafor, Lennon Vince, Borja Paulino, Ishmael Velez. If you are against my faith and believe in life, if you are against letting people speak by not letting them share the stage, and you own the press, then you are against the First Amendment. If your campaign wants to affect everyone's U.S. citizenship by dissociation with the United States, means you're against the entire Bill of Rights. Well, I see what you mean, Ismael. I got Prudencio Meno, Juanita Machi, Nate Horn. Happy Friday. Time for a drink. Well, however you enjoy your tall tales is a matter of personal preference. So long as you're here at Tall Tales, I guess the only thing I could say would be drive safely after the conclusion of the show. So that's the quorum that we have today. Going back to the Daily News the Daily News editorial, and I noticed Jack Hattig just signed up. So we're going to have some excitement in the second. Yeah, we'll have some excitement in the 7th inning because, Jack and his shoestring catches. And anyhow, back to the Daily News editorial. As I was saying, I think that when this referendum passed, I think that I think that expectations were way, way, way too high. That by a referendum, by passing a referendum, that all of a sudden problems would be overcome and something that is illegal would rise as though it were the beanstalk that the Jack climbed up to get to the upper levels. And I don't think it works that way. With almost everything else we do here, if we're starting something new, like some of the things that we started at the judiciary are various therapeutic courts. There's write up a grant proposal, and we can probably get some federal money to help us get started with it. And that happens so often. I don't think there's any federal money available to help a state or territory start up its illegal cannabis program. So what we're dealing with here is an attempt to pound a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't fit very well. I mentioned the other day that if someone somehow manages to get into the marijuana business here for profit, his business expenses won't be deductible because you can't deduct from federal tax any illegal expenditures. which makes the business a whole lot less profitable. I read an article yesterday that any sort of relationship to a cannabis business can cause problems with your insurance and your insurance policies. That is something to be on the lookout for. So I just can't go along with the idea that, well, you know, a lot of people really want to do it. We know it's against the law, so why is our government taking so long to get something off the ground that probably it shouldn't be doing to start with, even if a lot of people really want to do it? So much for the daily news. We move from there to the Post. School expulsion is one way of many to curb school violence. The recent circulation of school fight videos has provoked community-wide discussion about school safety, as it should. As a community, we must reduce the violence that students face, whether when they are waiting at a bus stop or walking through a school hallway. One way to reduce violence on campus is for school administrators to use their expulsion or long-term suspension authority against students involved in violent incidents. Guam Education Superintendent John Fernandez recently said that this would get the attention of the minority number of students who are involved in fights. We agree with Fernandez because GDOE must protect students' right to safety, which is critical to learning. Students can't focus on their studies if they're afraid of getting beaten up. Another way to reduce violence is to increase the number of school counselors and aides to provide further assistance to students with problems. Facing a limited budget, GDOE may have to decide between hiring a substitute teacher or a school aide. It's a difficult dilemma, but we say students can't learn if they are harmed or don't feel safe. Now that this compulsory education age has been raised to 18, it's important for schools to have a sufficient number of aides. Now, I wonder if the writer of this editorial knows what a school aide actually does. Probably not. While Island Eaters and GDOE can do more to reduce violence on campus, some parents and legal guardians can exert a more positive influence in their children's lives. Some parents can do more to stop their children from bullying by setting clear rules and enforcing appropriate consequences. Other parents and legal guardians should monitor their children's behavior for signs of being bullied, etc. Just as important, parents and other adults around children should set example for anger management and conflict resolution. The reports of family violence arrests on Guam show that many children show up in homes where there is physical or verbal abuse. From parents to government officials, all of us must do our part to stop school violence. Students should not have to fear they might become victims or bystanders of violence on campus. How can we expect them to succeed if we fail them? It's a good question, and I don't know that I wonder about expulsion. You know, it's kind of like if a kid is a classic truant and you suspend him for 10 days for truancy, does that really get a message home to him? Are the kids that are in these fights at school, are they the kinds of kids that would wear expulsion like a badge? That being expelled from school would just give them a little bit more time to create mischief somewhere else? Tough questions. We have a Department of Youth Affairs. There is a schoolhouse at the Department of Youth Affairs. It's called Lihang Famaguon. And children who are beyond control at school, etc., even though they've committed no crimes, can be sent to Lihang Famaguon. It's kind of a scary thought, though, that a kid could go from school to what we used to call back in the day reform school. So perhaps the permissive age that we live in, the ultra-permissive age that we live in, where we no longer value the concept of right and wrong, where everything is kind of relative, is being passed on to the younger generation. And their thoughts are, well, you know, if adults can pretty much come and go as they please, why can't I? And we've lulled ourselves into thinking that we should give children far more ability to take charge of their own situation than what is warranted. There's a bill in the legislature to give the student member of the Board of Education a vote. Silly. You know, we start out with the idea that until a child reaches a certain age, he's not mature enough to make decisions for himself. There was a time when that age was 21. Back when I was in my teens, it was 21. You know, you had to be 21 to buy a car, and 21 to buy liquor, and 21 to do a lot of things. But then during the Vietnam War, we kind of lulled ourselves into the thought process where we said, well, if a guy is old enough to fight, then he's old enough to do all of these other things, even if he's not 21. But to think that a student in the school system ought to have a right to vote on the school board, to me, is kind of a wrong-headed approach. And it's not the problem, but it may sort of be emblematic of some of the mindsets that we need to deal with. So I'm going to ask Ryan for a little bit of help on this knotty problem here. What do you think, Ryan?
Hey, Bob. You know, on the bill on, you know, what you're talking about with the legislature, haven't read up on that just yet, so I'm going to refrain from making any comment on that. But let's go back to the discipline factor that you were talking about with the kids, you know, being at DYA and whatnot. You know, back in the 80s, they had a Scare Straight program. Do you know what happened as to why they stopped doing it? All these kids said, yeah.
I do remember that, and no, I don't know why it stopped. I know that somebody who was scared straight was able to perfect a suit against the government of Guam and make a recovery. However, he was really too old to even have been in that Scare Straight program, but that may have had something to do with it.
I heard something to the effect that a couple of psychologists got together, and I guess it was even going far back as, you know, on the United States, that they were saying that kids were psychologically affected by it. I'm like, well, that was the whole purpose of it.
Yeah.
The title Scared Straight, you know, I mean, because I had actually a couple of family members that went through it, and they got reformed. I mean, you know, when you're facing prisoners saying, you need to come over here so I could take care of you in prison, you know, that really scared them straight in terms of, you know, they started performing better in school. They weren't disrespectful to the teachers and whatnot. I think it's probably something that we may have to look at in terms of, you know, going through. I mean, because I totally agree with you in terms, you know, just to basically expel people and everything. I'm like, hey, you know, it's almost like you're giving a drug addict more drugs to use, especially if you're like skipping school, you know. And to say, okay, you don't have any school anymore because you're kicked out for X amount of time. It doesn't for me. It's almost probably avoiding the problem, the root of the problem, pretty much. You know, and that's my take. I just wanted to put that 2 cents in, Bob.
Okay, well, I agree with you, Ryan, and you know, I pointed to the ultra permissive times in which we live today. You know, where the child's feelings are far more important than anything else, far more important than setting any standards of behavior for him or letting him know that there's a downside to misbehavior. We've kind of abandoned those old-fashioned ideas, don't you think? So it's just a sign of the times in which we live. So I'm glad that Ryan chimed in on that. And if you have any comments you want to make on Facebook on that subject. I'll keep an eagle eye open for him. I'm glad to see that Linda Gabriel has joined us, and my old buddy Brad Hokanson is on board, and Jose Martinez is recognizing the good work done by our famous Real Joe Cruz.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Jack Hattig wants to know if he could pinch hit. I think maybe we'll let Jack take a turn in the batter's box today. What do you think, Real
It's
Joe
up to
Cruz?
you, Coach. It's up to you.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe seventh, top of the seventh, bases loaded, right? Pitcher coming to bat. Who are you going to send in to bat? Maybe Jack Hattig. A. Camacho is here. Hello, A. And Chris Abalencia, don't spare the rod. The old saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. Okay, well, the Real Joe is strumming away on Dave Brubeck's Take 5 again, so I'm going to take a short break, and then we got about 10 minutes to that big halftime show that you've all been looking forward to, so I'll be right back.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
The season of giving is here, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting want to give back. 93.3 The Point, Boss 104, Star 101, and Lux Guam present Charity of Choice. Each of our radio personalities have chosen a Guam charity that they would like to benefit.
Habitat for Humanity,
Foster Families Association,
Guam Homeless Coalition,
Catholic Social Services,
Erica's House,
Oasis Empowerment Center,
and the Salvation Army.
Each charity has a donation drop box that you, the public, can contribute to. Your donation gets you an entry for the chance to win a water purification system just in time for the holidays, courtesy of American Water Tech. Tune in daily and follow us on all our social media for updates on the box locations, types of donations needed, and why your favorite on-air talent shows their charity. Charity of Choice 2018 is brought to you by Choice Broadcasting Company, Lux Guam, American Water Tech, and the station that gives from the heart, 93.3 The Point.
Okay, so coming back from the break, next item on the card is gubernatorial candidates outline platform at forum. And that was the forum that the Rotary Club held yesterday at the Outrigger. And thanks to the very generous, the extreme generosity of Dr. Tom Poole, I was able to attend. I had a good reason to attend, starting out with the idea that it's often said that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, when Dr. Tom Poole invites you, there is a footnote to that rule that there's no such thing as a free lunch, unless Dr. Tom Poole invites you to go to Rotary with him. So I had a great time socializing with Dr. Tom Poole, who, as we all know from our Tall Tales experience, a pretty interesting guy, has had a lot of interesting experience. And, of course, we were there for the debate, and I was able to sit right at the front table and had a very good view of the candidates as they dealt with the questions involved, had a chance to take a look at their facial expressions, their body language, etc. And I have the usual thorough report here by our very own Kevin Kerrigan. And I'll just click off some of the questions. First question, if elected, what would you do in the first 100 days? And Tenorio says, I think it's important that we have a dedicated funding source for the hospital. That is first and foremost. He also spoke about the need to fast-track the process for those seeking to invest in the island and the importance of improving the efficiency of Guam by creating an e-government and going as paperless as possible. Lulian Guerrero said, I would go to the Department of Revenue and Taxation and streamline the processes that they have. Well, Lou, I hope you're listening when I get down to that part of the card called Paul Pablo versus the legislature, and you will find out that there is a mechanism available to the Department of Revenue and Taxation that they haven't used, but they really should. She said, I want to make sure that the collectors have the tools and the resources to collect the $200 million of uncollected taxes that this administration has forgotten to collect. She said she would work hard to make our finances stable in order to provide more police officers in our community. This administration has failed miserably in providing for the safety of our community. And the nice thing about running against the incumbent lieutenant governor is that your platform, the things that you stand for, also can have a negative aspect to your opponent. So by saying the things that you want to do, you're at the very same time politely, or perhaps not so politely, criticizing your opponent for the things that he hasn't done, and it's very difficult for position for him to come back from. Lou said she would work hard to make our finances stable in order to provide more police officers for the community. The administration has failed miserably. Frank Uggan was not allowed to speak. Going back to, let's see, whose comment was that on Facebook today? Going back to Ismail's comment, Frank Uggan was not allowed to speak at the Rotary. He and Alicia were there at the beginning, as the crowd assembled. Wasn't much of a crowd, as the lunchtime guests assembled for a shake and howdy with everybody there, kind of, a little pressing the flesh, a little retail campaigning. But then Kevin sent emails to the Uggan campaign for Frank Uggan's answers. Frank's question is, it will be my administration's priority to establish a government restructuring and consolidation team. The team will review the functions and services of all executive branch agencies and formulate a plan of action to prioritize agencies and entities that provide critical service within education, public health, and health care. The plan must ensure that the government services continue to meet the needs of the community, and then he would issue executive orders to execute the plan in order to stabilize our government finances and ensure the continuity of essential government services. Well, I remember that this is exactly the enabling legislation that Frank Uggan was able to get in the bill, inserted into the bill, that raised the sales tax, and it's called the Government Reorganization Chapter. So I guess that's what he's talking about there. Next question, where do you stand on the issue of deporting criminals in prison back to their homeland of citizenship? This is not a very well worded question. Because here's how it works. If an alien is convicted of a crime in the United States involving moral turpitude, we spent a lot of time talking about what moral turpitude is. That alien is subject to deportation, and the deportation is done by I can't remember whether it's ICE or, I guess it's ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or anyhow, one of those agencies. And the way it works is that when an alien who meets that criteria is nearing the end of his term, then prison officials notify the immigration folks, and the immigration folks then will file papers to keep that alien in jail, in prison at the Department of Corrections until they can arrange for his transportation back to the country of his origin until he's deported. There's some paperwork to be filed, potential for a hearing, etc. That's how it works. So it's nothing really imaginative on the part of a governor. It's something that's always been there and always been available. The only exception are these places in like California where we have these sanctuary cities where there are city ordinances that forbid jail and prison officials from notifying the immigration authorities when one of these aliens' term of imprisonment is about to end. So they have to, the immigration folks have to try to figure out who to deport and how to get a hold of that person in order to deport him. We're not, fortunately, we're not that loony here on Guam. We do deport those criminals. So the real question is not, are you in favor of deporting them? To me, the really hardball question here is, are you in favor of shortening the sentences of aliens so that they can be deported and not spend their time in the Department of Corrections? And I've raised that question before. Is it a good criminal justice system? I'm going to come back to this item here after we enjoy that huge halftime show that we have every day, you know, the marching bands, the drill teams, the acrobats, the sword swallowers, the synchronized card sections up in the grandstand, and that loud barrage of cannon fire at the end. So I'll see you in the second half. That'll be about 10 minutes. See you then.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The president in campaign mode. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. President Trump sticking with his busy campaign schedule, stopping in Columbia, Missouri Thursday night.
In a very important state ahead of the midterms, President Trump came here. He fired up this crowd of several thousand people for over an hour, touting the achievements he has made since he took office 2 years ago. He talked about the booming economy, the low unemployment rate, the return of manufacturing jobs, of ongoing trade talks with China, and he said, quote, now we're getting along with North Korea. He also warned those victories and more could vanish if Democrats take back Congress.
Fox's Claudia Cowan, the Missouri U.S. Senate race, by the way, currently in a dead heat. Meantime, media giant Oprah Winfrey hosting a town hall Thursday in Decatur, Georgia, on behalf of Democrat Stacey Abrams, who's trying to become the first ever female African-American governor. Winfrey telling the crowd,
so I'm here as an independent who made my own decision, paid my own way. Nobody paid for me to be here. And I have approved this message.
Stacey Abrams locked in a tie race currently with Republican Brian Kemp. Vice President Mike Pence pushing back on claims that President Trump is creating a stunt by sending U.S. troops to the U.S. southern border as a migrant caravan approaches.
They were sent north for the sole and exclusive reason of challenging the laws of the United States of America by coming into our country illegally. And the president's made it clear we're not going to allow it.
The vice president on prime time with Trish Regan on the Fox Business Network. Iran bracing for the restoration of U.S. sanctions on its oil industry. Those sanctions taking effect this coming Monday will target the country's largest source of revenue and the most punishing action since the Trump White House withdrew the U.S. from a controversial 2015 nuclear agreement this past May. This is Fox News.
As I look around, there are so many longtime Democrats.
but it doesn't serve the good of our island or our Democratic Party when we don't embrace the will of our party. And that will was choosing Lou and Josh.
The people that have been forgotten, we will bring people helping people back. I'm banking on Lou and Josh.
I want to invite those Democrats, those Republicans that are sitting maybe on the sidelines. Well, I want to tell them that they have a home here with us.
Family is about more than who you are related to. It includes everyone. This election is coming down to one value and one value only: trust. Who will you trust to protect the people of Guam?
And I approve this ad.
A lot of poll watching, but just days to go before the big midterms next week.
According to Fox's latest polling, in 5 key battleground states, 3 Senate races, Missouri, Arizona, and Indiana, remain solid toss-ups. Republicans hold the lead in Tennessee and North Dakota, but voter enthusiasm on the left could narrow some of that gap. In Indiana, incumbent Democrat Senator Joe Donnelly is ahead of his Republican challenger Mike Braun by 7 points, but 1 in 5 voters who picked a favored candidate said they could change their mind by Election Day. The Missouri Senate race is a tie. Missouri Democratic incumbent Claire McCaskill and her Republican challenger Josh Hawley are both at 43%. In Arizona, Democrat Kirsten Sinema and Republican Martha McSally are tied among likely voters.
Fox's Ellison Barber. Election Day is this Thursday, the 6th of November. The suspect accused of gunning down 11 people at a Pittsburgh synagogue last weekend, pleading not guilty Thursday to federal charges that could end him up on death row. Robert Bowers arraigned one day after a grand jury issued a 44-count indictment charging him with murder and other crimes. The family of rocker Chris Cornell suing a doctor over his death.
Chris Cornell's widow and their children accused Dr. Robert Coblin and his office of negligently and repeatedly prescribing mind-altering drugs that ultimately cost the rock singer his life. The lawsuit in particular says the doctor prescribed Cornell large amounts of the anti-anxiety medication lorazepam. The plaintiffs arguing the drug is known to increase the risk of suicide because it can severely impair judgment, thinking, and impulse control. Cornell's death was ruled a suicide by hanging. Toxicology tests found several drugs in his system. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Indonesian divers are resuming a search today for a second black box amid the sunken wreckage of a nearly new jet that slammed into the sea off Jakarta earlier this week, killing all 198 people on board. So far, searchers finding only part of one black box. I'm Paul Stevens. This is Fox News.
Subway Restaurants is celebrating World Sandwich Day this Saturday, November 3rd, with a delicious deal. Buy one, get one free. That's right. Buy any sub in a 30-ounce drink, and we'll give you another sub free. Create your favorite sub any way you want it, toasted or not, with cheese or without. Add a pile of fresh veggies, your favorite sauce, and share a free sub with a friend or family member. Visit any of Subway's 14 locations and celebrate World Sandwich Day with the Buy One, Get One Free all-day event. Saturday, November 3rd. Subway. Make it what you want.
Life is too short to be isolated from the people you love. Hearing loss is the invisible disability. The experts at Guam Hearing Doctors have solutions.
Mike St. doesn't believe we are confident enough to govern ourselves.
We don't want people who are not confident in their own self-governance to be voting on self-government.
Yet, we pursued more self-government because we are confident we can govern ourselves. The only person who does not trust the people of Guam is Mike St. If he doesn't trust us, we can't trust him. Let's vote for Doris Flores Brooks, a trusted, experienced representative who believes and trusts the people of Guam.
I'm Doris Flores Brooks, and I approve this message.
Paid for by DC Doors for Congress Committee, Vicki Ganache's board treasurer.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, delivering service that can't be beat.
Josh and I have proposed a comprehensive plan to kickstart our economy, create jobs with rising wages, fight the root causes of crime, fund our schools, and make our classrooms safer places to learn. I know the value of life, and when a mother has to go through that very personal decision, it should be done in privacy, not the government, Ray. Stay out of it.
He knows a lot about conflict of interest, since he's the one that sent the bill down to the legislature to give himself a pay raise. And I promise you this. I will be a hardworking lieutenant governor, working every day to meet the challenges of Guam and to lift Lou's vision for Guam that is fair, safe, and prosperous.
And I approve this ad.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
For over 30 years, Stanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Stanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Stanford Technology Group.
What a show. I'm so glad we're able to bring that to our international radio listening audience every day at 5. What a treat. And by the way, out there in our international radio listening audience, I haven't mentioned it up to this point, but if you want to be a part of Tall Tales, the international country code for the United States is 1. Our area code here is 671. Our phone number is 888-8255. That's 888-8255. Easy way to remember it. 888-TALK. And you dial that number, and your call will be answered by the very friendly Real Joe Cruz, who will push a few buttons, make my screen light up, and in a matter of seconds, you will be talking to our international radio listening audience all over the world. It's quite an accomplishment if you stop to think about it. And for our Facebookers out there, if you're watching Facebook right now, if you wanted to run your mouse up there to where that arrow where it says share and click on that word share, I can tell you I would not be offended in the slightest. And you would be doing all of your Facebook friends a big favor, because you would be steering them to the top-rated afternoon FM radio talk show in the Western Pacific. There's none better. And you could get them signed up with perhaps induct them into the Tall Tales Nation and turn them into Tall Tales buffs, just like you are. So during the halftime break, I had a chance to look at some of our Facebook comments, and Elena Garcia is talking about violence in the schools. And she says, I don't believe that is going to help them. I'm not quite sure what she means by that, but maybe she's going back to Chris Abalencia, don't spare the rod. Elena says, I don't believe that's going to help them. I believe they should be taught to be respectable all the way up to high school. I, as a grandmother who had 2 of my grands who were attacked by 11 students, I think these kids served time in DYA. The judiciary system still has not done anything about these children. The AG's office still has not done anything. The ones that were sent to DYA were released in a week. There were other children attacked by the same or other students. Not a good situation. Carl chimes in and he says that the result of tolerating disrespect of authority and lawlessness, what I would label as this overwhelming permissiveness that we are embracing here in the 21st century, where people who talk in terms of what's right and wrong, moral and immoral, good and bad, are shunned as being old-fashioned and not with it, and not understanding the relativistic nature of modern society. And it's how it's working. It's just not working for us very well at all. Carl also chimes in, and he says that he agrees with Richard. I can't figure out what it was that Richard said. And Carl also says that I have issues with Frank, but less than I do with the other two. Of the three, I would feel the most comfortable with him at the helm. Too many questionable actions with Lou and Frank. Oh, okay, and Elena clarifies expelling them. So Elena is saying she doesn't think expelling them would help. I got a feeling that what Elena is looking for is hard time at DYA. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe if kids understand that if they commit acts of violence in school, they're not going to be out of DYA in a week. They're going to be there for quite a while. And it's really not a fun place to be. Then we've got Jose Martinez, who chimes in on what's going to be our next topic on the card. Anyone who advocates the killing of a child in the womb does not know the value of life. So I'm going to finish this up, and then the next item on the card is candidates versus abortion. So I think we said enough about deporting criminals. It's a softball question. The only one that I think really touched it was Frank Uggan. He said it's important to follow federal immigration law and ensure that the laws and process are strictly enforced and complied with. However, he asked, should we give people from foreign countries a get-out-of-jail-free card? He said, my response, absolutely not. Well, I can see the wisdom in that. As I've mentioned, I've talked about that before. So let's say someone is sentenced to 15 years at the Department of Corrections. He does 5 years, and the governor commutes his sentence to a 5-year term, and he's released to immigration authorities, and he's deported back to where he came from. I just wonder what kind of an example that sets to other people who might be tempted to commit crimes, thinking being, well, I'm going to do it because they won't punish me that severely. What they're going to wind up doing is sentencing me home. I'm really glad I'm not an American citizen, because if I were an American citizen, there'd be no commutation. I'd have to do my whole sentence. So, and then I've criticized Governor Calvo for attempting to convince us that he's saving a lot of money by commuting sentences of prisoners and sending them off to deportation, because the real cost of incarcerating a prisoner is the marginal cost, not the incremental cost. So if you have 100 prisoners and it costs you $20,000 a year for 100 prisoners, that's $200,000. So if you add one more prisoner, your cost per prisoner goes down, because you're now dividing 200 by 101 instead of 100. So that's an unrealistic figure. Fixed costs remain the same. So by releasing a prisoner, you're saving, of course, his food cost and his medical cost and his dental cost, which for some inmates can be pretty extreme. But in my mind, I'm not sure that it makes sense to let people off easily based on those savings. Going back to kids who misbehave or kids who commit violent acts in school, Ismail Velez apparently reads the Singapore newspapers, because Ismail Velez is saying public caning, then deport. Caning works pretty well for the folks in Singapore. I don't know if we would tolerate it here. The next question, the qualifying certificate was used to grow our tourism industry. What other industries do you see as fit for Guam that can use tax benefits to grow? When that question was asked, a voice was heard in the crowd saying, "Soto voce, banking." Maybe if foreign banks wanted to come in here, we should give them qualifying certificates so there'd be more competition in the banking industry. That would have been a good one to throw at Leanne Guerrero. Leanne Guerrero said it's critical that businesses granted qualifying certificates are continuously monitored. She suggested that tax benefits offered by the QC program could be used to establish several critical industries, such as fisheries, cruise ships, aquaculture, among others. Well, we've had fisheries before, and the problem with fisheries is that, and we had tuna. We had a pretty good-sized tuna fleet here, if you remember that. But the problem with tuna fish is they can't read qualifying certificates. So just because the fishermen are given qualifying certificates doesn't mean that those pesky tuna won't swim away to some other jurisdiction. Tenorio said one area worth exploring is manufacturing. He said he's talked to investors who are interested in products made in the U.S., and to get that, a certain amount of the product has to be assembled on U.S. soil. He also spoke about the need to revise the QC program. But let's go back to this assembling products on U.S. soil. We've been there. We've tried that. And it violates David Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, and it never lasts very long. I know most people wouldn't remember this, but here's an interesting fact about manufacturing on Guam. At one time, we had 14 watch factories on Guam, 14 manufacturers of watches right here on our little isle. The building where Carmen's Cha-Cha-Cha, I should have given you a warning there. I could have used a sound effect on that one, Real Joe Cruz. Where Carmen's Cha-Cha, that was a watch factory back in the 70s. And the way it worked was this, that parts for watches were imported from Russia. And there's a loophole in American tariff law called Head Note 3A that says that if you add half the value to a product, it can enter the United States duty-free and quota-free with a label made in the USA on it. So we did that. We had 3 textile factories here, companies that made shirts and coats and things like that, taking advantage of the same loopholes. Saipan, of course, went crazy with garment manufacturers because they had not only the 3A loophole, but when the covenant was first entered into, the United States agreed that it would not enforce immigration and labor laws in the Northern Marianas immediately. The right to do that was reserved. So the game in Saipan was to bring the parts of the shirts from China, to bring cheap Chinese labor from China, and the cheap Chinese labor put the shirts together, added half the value to them, sewed in a label that said made in the USA, and sold them to major American manufacturers. And you recall that some folks in Saipan made huge amounts of money off the garment manufacturers. Well, all of that stuff came to an end The garment factories in Saipan came to an end when the World Agreement on Trade and Tariffs was changed in 2005 that destroyed that particular advantage created by those loopholes. As far as watch factories in the United States are concerned, American watch factories got legislation through Congress, the U.S. Congress, to kill that industry. So it died also. So you get back to comparative advantage. We've talked about that before here in Tall Tales. And here's an example. You could raise bananas on Manhattan Island, greenhouses, hydroponics, etc. You could raise bananas on Manhattan. But why would you want to? How much would you have to charge for a bunch of bananas raised on Manhattan in order to make a profit when you know how expensive the real property is and you know that Manhattan real estate can be put to a lot of other uses other than raising bananas? Or another example, tuna and bananas. You could raise bananas in Alaska, same proposition, and you could raise, you could have tuna farms in Peru or Ecuador, where a lot of the bananas come from. But why would you want to? Because you'd be dealing with very expensive products. So the way things work is that industries tend to gravitate to the place where they are best suited. And there's a fancy way of saying it that I can't remember, but what the industries that we need to be looking for are the industries that would thrive here even in the absence of a qualifying certificate. As an example, when the idea of captive insurance companies first came along, we thought, well, we're going to get in on captive insurance companies. The only thing we did was exempt our own insurance companies. We gave them huge tax breaks, and we never attracted a single captive insurance company, except maybe maybe we're going to have a captive insurance company now because an application is pending right now for, what's the name of that, the company, the large Korean construction company? They have a captive insurance plan pending. And the way captive insurance works is this. A company would have its own insurance company and insure its own risk. Insurance companies will insure risks, and then they will sell their risk off to reinsurers. And that's how the industry works. So no insurance company keeps all of the risk in its own portfolio. They fob the risk off to other companies and pay other companies premiums to take over that risk. So a captive insurance company then just eliminates one level of insurance companies and operates Cortec, thanks, Brad. Yeah, Cortec has a captive insurance application pending right now. So that would be the way that would work, and it eliminates one level of insurance companies, and it allows companies to be more profitable. Well, we talked about it, and and we gave our own insurance companies tax breaks, but we never attracted a captive insurance company. Brazil, Bermuda, on the other hand, from what I understand, was a magnet for captive insurance companies because, given their colonial status, they have tremendous stability and the ability to grant tax incentives to American companies, and it worked very, very well for them. So you could lump those things under financial services. So that might be something that we could capitalize on. I thought we really missed the boat when GRMC was built. You'll recall the idea with the QC program is to attract new industries. Well, we gave GRMC a QC after it was almost completely built. There wasn't much attraction going on there. I don't know how that happened, but that there's probably a really interesting story involved there. But had I been able to have any influence on that proposition, I would have said, GRMC, you could have a qualifying certificate provided that you establish a means of engaging in medical tourism so that people from other countries who want to avail themselves of American medicine can come to GRMC. If that had happened, then the economies of scale would have allowed GRMC to provide more services, probably at a lower rate than it does right now. So I don't think anybody handled this question very well. So much for that. I've got some Facebook comments here I'm going to take a look at. Yeah, Brad helped me out there. It's Cortec. And Daryl Taggety, comparative advantage is the term you're thinking of. Government instability or making up rules as you go or making rules after investment proposed are always ways to increase risk. Politicians then cozy up to investors to lower risk at a price. Corruption if investment climate is not established in advance. Exactly. And there's another very seldom used term that comes into play here, the term economic rent. Economic rent means that element of profitability that is not attributable to the skill or enterprise of a business. It's attributable to some government break. As an example, some of the licensing procedures that governments enter into, you know, like you could be the second Clarence Darrow, but you can't go out and hang up your shingle and start practicing law unless you jump through the hoops that the government has established. But I'll come back to this after the seventh inning stretch.
Super Typhoon U2 spared us here on Guam, but the same cannot be said for our neighboring islands. From now till November 16th, join us as we help Saipan and Tinian to get back on their feet. Acceptable donations include batteries, flashlights, tools, cleaning supplies, mosquito coils, rope, toiletries, personal hygiene items, and others. Donations can be dropped off to all GTA stores, the Guam Daily Post, all Guam Fire Department stations, and the Santa Teresita Catholic Church. For more information on how you can help, visit postguam.com.
I'm Ken Leon Guerrero, spokesperson for Guam Citizens for Public Accountability, reminding you that your vote counts. Help make Guam's future better than Guam's recent past by voting for the write-in candidate Frank Uggan and Alicia Limpiaco. And vote for the rest of the candidates recommended for a better Guam. You can find the list in the full-page ad in this Sunday's Guam Daily Post. For more information, visit Guam Citizens' website at www.guamc4pa.org.
Seventh, bases loaded, and Jack Haddock is sent into the batter's box as a pinch hitter. Wow! Boy, he got a hold of that one. one. This one's going for extra bases. Haddock is rounding second. He's on his way to third. The center fielder is just chasing that ball down. What a hit. He's going to go for it. He did. He's sliding. It was an inside the park home run. Listen to the fans. Jack Haddock. Boy, he got a hold of that one and sent it to deep center. And the center fielder underestimated and was playing Jack too shallow.
You made me spill my beer, Bob.
There's nothing like the seventh inning stretch here at Tall Tales, coming to you directly from Wrigley Field. Okay, so I'm going to get, I need a comment here on Jack's brilliant hit. So, Carl, what did you think of that long ball that Jack just hit?
That was pretty amazing. I had popcorn all over the place.
Yeah. Jack never disappoints, does he?
No, he's an amazing player. That's why he's a Haddock. That's why we associate Haddock with baseball.
Haddock, kung ano hafte mano masangan palabra baseball gifino tomorrow? Haddock, huh?
Exactly. You put me to shame, Bob.
Okay. So what can you tell me today, Carl?
Well, I kind of wanted to just steer the conversation in a direction. You saw the comments that I sent you a copy of some comments I posted to my Facebook friends regarding concerns about Lou's candidacy. I mentioned at the top of the comments that I had issues with all three candidates, especially with Lou and Ray. But one of my concerns with Lou is her deep involvement with the separatist movement, the nationalist movement. She's a member of Wet'suwet'en Famalawan. She's a supporter of Patay Litigzan, the Hadza Foundation, the Women of Tinian. All these groups are basically anti-military. And to me, that speaks to me that she is for ending our present relationship with the U.S., and that highly concerns me. Some people kind of blow this off and say, well, that's not going to happen. Well, I'm seeing things now and hearing things now that I never thought I would hear in my entire life. So just minimizing that involvement in the holder of the highest office on Guam, I think I don't think that is a good approach to it. I think we need to be very concerned about that, because she will have say in how the island is perceived. I have a friend of mine who is involved in the realignment, the Marine transfer to Guam, and she was listening in on the conversations when there were U.S. representatives that came here to get feedback on the troop buildup, and she was hearing comments about some of them noticing the amount of negative feedback they were getting from the leadership. And she made some other comments I won't delve into, but they're highly, highly concerning, because these representatives take seriously these negative comments they're hearing. And we've seen the result of what some of these movements have done as far as destroying SRF and ending, so many jobs, people's lives just thrown up in the air. And so I'm concerned about that, about someone that is running for the highest office on our island holding those views. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that, thought out to your listeners, as I did to my Facebook friends, and it got, a pretty good fair amount of conversation going. So I just wanted to stimulate the conversation in that direction.
Well, I'm glad you did, Carl. I think those are really good points. And you'll remember the Fab Five when Judy Wonpat and a couple of other senators got 3 U.S. senators in their office at the legislature and scolded them, apparently. It doesn't help us very much. And it's not going to be beneficial in the short term or the long run because we've only got 2 industries here. We're not in a position where we can chase where when people want to come here and spend money that we can chase them away, and I think that is the kind of the result. And I have my second thoughts about Lou Leon Guerrero also with respect to her attitude towards the military. I remember when John Gerber was hot on changing the name of our major highway to Marine Corps Drive. The thinking was that an awful lot of folks thought that Marine Drive, the name Marine Drive arose from the street's proximity to the ocean. Where Gerber thought it would be important that people understand that Marine Corps Drive was meant to honor the 1,548 Marines that died fighting the Japanese for this island. And without going into any of the details, there were 2 gigantic roadblocks to getting that bill. It was my bill. And I wasn't able to get it passed. There were 2 extremely strong roadblocks. One of them was Lou, who didn't want that bill to pass. So those who remember those times remembered that Governor Camacho at the time changed the name of Marine Drive to Marine Corps Drive by executive order, which was appropriate because it was originally named by the military governor of Guam, General Larson, by his executive order. So a statute wasn't required. The executive order did it, but I still remember that, and it left a really bad taste in my mouth, full disclosure here. And that was just the naming of a street. So when I put on my political prism, you've heard me talk about that before, I'm sure, Carl.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I look through my political prism at those events, it didn't make much sense because the only thing that Lou could do on that whole exercise was lose. There wasn't any good politics and standing in the way of changing the name of that highway. It had to have been more from a matter of personal pique or something like that. So, yeah, I share your view. It's something to be very concerned about.
Yeah, the military, for whatever we think of it, it is, my concern is, my mom was a teenager along with many of my uncles and aunties on the island, and shortly before the Americans arrived, she and one of my aunties were chosen to serve as comfort women. So these young men, many of them volunteers, voluntarily going into some of the most brutal combat the world has ever known, sacrificed their lives, and thousands more were wounded. And they rescued my mom and my auntie from being repeatedly, basically raped. So I'm extremely grateful. They gave my mom and my uncles and aunties and all my fellow Chamorros living at the time freedom, and they gave me 50 years with my mom before she passed from Alzheimer's. I was her sole caregiver for 6 years as Alzheimer's took her. But I'm extremely thankful, and that's one of the motivating forces that causes me to speak up, because I'm tremendously grateful to those young men that many of them didn't have to do it. They volunteered to leave their comfortable lives in the States and go into the most horrific fighting that the world has ever seen. And one thing that, I noticed I'm seeing more and more comments online about, candidates being anti-development. And one thing that, once they say that, they totally lose me. I mean, if you take a satellite photo of Guam, we're not exactly covered with concrete. There's the vast majority of the island is still lush and green. I like to share the story of one of my best friends in middle school. He was Chamorro also. And when he was 20, he passed out over 30 applications around the island for a job. The best response he got was for security guard. And he, not to put down security guards, but he had bigger ambitions. So he joined the Air Force. He spent in 30 years. He rose to Chief Master Sergeant, which is the highest you can go in the Air Force as a non-officer. He earned 2 master's degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees, and 3 associate's degrees. After he retired, he went into the federal service, starting as a GS-12, which is way up the ladder. He's got a great home and a great life in Texas. And that story has been repeated thousands and thousands and thousands of times over decades, because we don't have that many opportunities on Guam. And for some to come along and say, well, we don't want any development, shut down development, well, all that's going to do is just cause more and more and more Chamorros and non-Chamorros to go off island to create a better life. And that's what you don't hear with the anti-military and anti-development stance. It sounds great, but the consequences are that. You see tens of thousands of people moving off island looking for opportunity.
All good points, Carl. As usual, I really appreciate your call. Thanks for calling.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to express my thoughts, and I hope some of the listening audience.
Okay, so I've got Annie patiently waiting. Hello, Annie.
Hi, good afternoon, Bob. How are you doing today?
Good, good.
I called in because I caught kind of the middle of the conversation you were having with Carl just a couple of minutes ago, and he was talking about Lou Liangaro being anti-military and wanting to sever our ties with the United States, but I don't think she's ever come out and said any of that, and he's inferring that based on the fact that she supports certain groups. And a lot of those groups that he was talking about are groups for professional women. And does that mean we shouldn't be supporting professional women, or is there something wrong with women being successful and then expressing their opinions? I don't think so. I think that, in our society, we are a matrilineal society, and women do play a very important role. And I think
Guam is a matrilineal society?
Matrilineal society, yes, traditionally.
Matrilineal means that the lineage is through the mother and not the father, so children take the mother's name?
No, I'm sorry. I misspoke. I mean matriarchal society.
There you go. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's been a very long day. There's lots of cemeteries that was hot today. But, I think that it's a little short-sighted to say that because Lou supports certain women's organizations that have held certain opinions, that automatically means she's anti-military and anti-development. I don't think that's the case. She's the president of an FDIC bank, federally regulated. I don't think that somebody like that is going to say, oh, we shouldn't be part of the United States. And I just don't think she's ever come out to say that she wanted to separate from the United States in any way. So to make that kind of a conclusion because she may have supported one or another certain groups doesn't necessarily mean that that's what she believes. So we need to let her speak on what her belief is in terms of what she thinks about either our political association with the United States or what she feels about the military buildup. I think she's said more than once that she supports the buildup, that she supports a responsible buildup, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
That's my only comment.
Okay, Annie, thanks a lot for calling and sharing your point of view.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
Thank you, Annie. And let's see, who have I got next? I don't guess my phone is broken, right, Real Joe Cruz? I'm not able.
It's probably jacked up. Your phone's probably jacked up.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe if I unplug it and change the jack, plug it into a different jack, it might work better. Yeah. Hi, Jack. Hi, Jack.
Well, today, nowadays, with new technology, jacks are now pretty much useless.
Yes, you said it. I didn't.
Yeah, well, it's a fact, Jack. So, no, I just wanted to ring. I heard you talking about Marine Corps drive, and I'm two generations removed from the war, and what really upset me about the change of the name was that there was a senator at the time who was also an educator. I think you remember her, Carmen Fernandez.
I'm having difficulty hearing you, Jack. You sound like you're calling from the bottom of a tin can.
Yeah. I think, do you remember Carmen Fernandez?
I do.
Yeah, she was the one that said that for the longest time that she thought that Marine Drive was named after the ocean. Nobody else said that. I'm two generations removed from the war, and I can tell you with 100% certainty that everyone in my class, in every public school and every private school, knew that Marine Drive was because of the Marine Corps.
Well, that's not my experience, Jack. Not my.
I'm talking about people here in Guam.
Me too. I probably have a fair amount of experience here on Guam, Jack. That wasn't my experience, but go on.
Well, yeah, I've never encountered that. I've never encountered that.
Okay.
But that's like saying that the UG Marine Lab was named after the ocean. I can guarantee you that if you were to poll...
Okay, do you want to move on and make your point?
If I guarantee you to poll that the Marine Lab down there was named after the Marine Corps, 1,000% would probably say that's probably the fact that it wasn't named after the ocean. But this is the problem that I have, is that you don't have to quote the truth. The truth is Marine Corps Drive was named after the Marines. You don't have to quote it with lies. You don't have to fabricate. You don't have to do anything, because that only muddies the water of the issue.
When you say you are you saying that that's what I'm doing?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in generality speaking.
Yeah.
That this doesn't have to be done. Now, I don't know who you hang around out with, or maybe you and Carmen Fernandez hang along with the same people, but at no time in my history.
Okay, Jack. I'll tell you what, Jack. I'm right up against a break here. I'll concede your point, okay? But I've got to take a break for the home stretch, and then I've got another caller online.
Yeah, but I'm glad that it's called Marine Corps Drive. That Johnny Gerber deserves credit, but so do you. But we don't need to go down this road of fabricating facts.
Well, nobody's fabricating facts, Jack. Thanks for your call.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talafofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan, Talafofo.
As I look around, there are so many longtime Democrats, but it doesn't serve the good of our island or our Democratic Party when we don't embrace the will of our party. And that will was choosing Lou and Josh.
The people that have been forgotten, we will bring people helping people back. I'm banking on Lou and Josh.
I want to invite those those Republicans that are sitting maybe on the sidelines. Well, I want to tell them that they have a home here with us.
Family is about more than who you are related to. It includes everyone. This election is coming down to one value and one value only: trust. Who will you trust to protect the people of Guam?
I'm Kenny Guerrero, and I approve this ad.
So here we are in the home stretch. We got about 8 more minutes until we begin to hear the plaintive chords of Ravel's Bolero, and I'm going to probably close out the program with candidate for Congress, Doris Flores Brooks. So you can have about 8 minutes, Doris, if you want it.
Well, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate it. The reason, first of all, I'm calling in is because last Friday, and I couldn't get into your show, but last Friday you had a caller by the name of Carl. I forgot what his last name is. And he seemed to imply that I was for independence, and I really wanted to set the record straight that I am not for independence, because he was kind of implying, if I'm running for Congress, why am I for independence? And I've always been for enhanced Commonwealth, because if you recall that, that so-called secret study that under President Ford, he had said that Guam should have the same Commonwealth Agreement treaty like the CNMI, but of course, as we know, the Department of Interior never let that study be known. Anyway, I just want to set the record straight that I am not, I have always advocated a stronger relationship. Whether statehood will ultimately come, I feel more confident that we can certainly enhance our Commonwealth relationship with the U.S. So I wanted to just set the record straight with that particular caller of yours, because he is a very regular caller, and he is quite articulate. I like the way he talks, and he's very thoughtful, and I just wanted to set the record straight with Carl.
Well, our Carl is one of the more esteemed members of Tall Tales Nation, that's for sure. But if you wanted to set the record straight, your voice has been heard by our entire international radio listening audience. So I think you've probably done that by calling Tall Tales, Doris.
Thank you very much. And then there's also another thing that I wanted your listeners to know, because I did not get too much publicity on this. On Sunday, I wrote a letter to the CEO of the Marine Corps, because when I saw what happened, when I saw on Dave Lott's Facebook page the alleged decimation of what happened at Retidian, I wrote a letter to the colonel saying, hey, I hope this is not the case. Please follow the EIS. And if need be, like what I did when I was the senator, I filed suit in court to stop the Nico Hotel to ensure that all of the relics and remains would be thoroughly and respectfully taken care of. But I have yet to hear from the colonel, and so I just want to, again, let the listeners know that I wrote that letter already on Sunday. Unfortunately, most of the news media, except for Ray Gibson on Monday, was the one who wanted me to talk on it. So, again, thank you for this opportunity, Bob.
Well, Tall Tales is certainly a bastion of free speech, and people who have an important message that they want to broadcast to our international radio listening audience are always welcome, Doris.
Well, thank you, and I certainly do appreciate that. And I saw subsequently acting Speaker Teresa Lahi, making a comment saying that the programmatic agreement may not have been followed. That was just, I think, yesterday, and so I haven't had an opportunity yet to speak with her. But if need be, I will file, and hopefully that won't have to come to pass. But we want the military to live up to their end of the bargain, and we want the military buildup to be beneficial, not just for the military, but for all of Guam.
Well, on that particular issue, you know, the Navy had a pretty good response as to what they thought that needed to be done and what they did. So I don't think all of the facts are in on that particular issue.
Well, that's what I said. I hope that you will continue. That's what I said in the letter. I hope that you will continue to live up to the programmatic agreement, whatever was said in the EIS, and that I don't need to file suit, but if need be, I will, to ensure that that our artifacts, our relics are respectively taken care of and housed. And if this area was not to be bulldozed, then we need to go back and look at it. But again, I don't have a before area to really speak, and that's why I'm just waiting to get a response from the Marines to ensure that are they living up to their end of the agreement.
Well, I guess my final word on that would be that anything that tends to benefit, anything that tends to generate fees for lawyers can't be all bad.
Well, it was my husband who filed the suit, and he did that for me pro bono. Okay. And in the remaining time here, I just want to ask the people of Guam to. I'm Doris Flores Brooks, your candidate for Washington delegate. I humbly ask for your vote come Tuesday, November 6th.
We'll get a rate card to you in the mail tomorrow, Doris.
Thank you very much, Bob, and keep up the good work and continue to help educate the listeners of Guam with all you do, because it has always been very informative.
Thank you very much, Doris. Nice talking to you.
Take care. God bless.
So, setting the record straight, and it's ironic that as our Carl was talking about the military buildup, Doris was holding on the other line, just waiting to set our Carl straight. So this is the beauty of tall tales. It's kind of like Forrest Gump's mother said, tall tales is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. See you on Monday.